Today's guest is Jack Houston. After graduating from his RN degree, he became a nurse in both the United States and Canada. His story has twists and turns of actual true life events that occurred as an RN. His book talks about true hospital stories and yet still contain comical stories. His patients as well as his identity has been kept confidential. Please give a warm welcome to ever-blessed Jack Houston. Welcome, Jack. Thank you for being a guest on my show. And I have just a couple questions to kind of know exactly what your story is and your journey as an RN. And you also have this book that's, to me, is like completely quite a doozy. And I just wanted to know, like, what directed you to go on this path of career? You know, how long ago did this career as an RN start? Could you give us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I can. And thank you for having me on the show, by the way. I really appreciate that. My journey began in the late 80s. And so that means I'm old, like very old now. So I worked over 30 years as an RN. You know, so some of these stories actually that I wrote in my book, some are actually when I was a student. And they kind of go back and forth. It's not all totally sequential. They're all individual stories, and some of them are when I was young, some are just before I finished my career. So they're all a mix all through. Now, that's the nice thing about the book because you don't have to read start to finish, sit down and do it all at once. If you're a really busy person, you can read one or two little stories, not pick it up for 2 weeks. You get another day off and you can read another one. It's, you know what I mean? So they're easy, digestible chapters, and that a lot of people seem to like that. And they're always a different story. So. You know, I didn't really know what I wanted to do at first. It was really hard. And, you know, a lot of my family, we have a very big family, you know, extended family, cousins, all that kind of stuff. But we have about 35 or 40 RNs in the family, you know, and a few doctors and lab techs. And medical is very big in our family. And I didn't really know what to do. Like a lot of kids, who knows what they want to do at 17, 18 years old, you know. So I just picked that, and you know, I got encouraged by my father to go into it, and I did. I figured, well, I'll start that now. Maybe I'll figure my way as I go along, and well, I continued with it, you know, and 30 some years later, stuck with it anyway. So I guess that's how it started, and to think of some of the places I worked as a nurse, I never would have imagined when I was in school that I would be doing it. But, you know, you think you know what your future is going to be, and it always changes depending on what you come across, you know?
Yes,
Changed
yes.
quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, when I came out of high school, my path was going into laboratory technology. So I was doing anatomy and physiology. I was doing chemistry, like hardcore. It was crazy. I was just a thought of like, my goal was to be involved in forensic science because I wanted to be the voice of the voiceless in that
Mhm.
aspect, to tell the story of the people who weren't able to be there to tell their own. Thought process of getting involved on that side of the field. Unfortunately, I was a teen mother, so that completely changed my whole scope on careers and needed to get something quicker and faster. So I just kind of threw myself into administrative work and HR and finally got my dual bachelor's in business administration and accounting. So I was doing that for about 20 years. You don't have a particular story that besides your father strongly encouraging you to get involved in the medical field, was there something else that kind of like solidified the idea that this was probably the path that you'd like to do?
So there wasn't any one story that led me to, you know, hey, I got to be a nurse, or this is the moment, or this is the thing, you know. I just kind of stuck with it, you know, didn't know what else to do. Didn't really want to be a nurse at first, you know, but I didn't know what else I could do. But I was very good at, you know, the sciences and things like that. So good fit academically. As you get into it more and more, you realize you can help people. And, you know, I thought I would be a teacher at first, like teach and go into public schools and teach kids, stuff like that. You know what I mean?
I
And I
totally.
never did
Yeah.
because as you go through it, you learn that it's just totally different than what you think.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Anyway,
Yeah. 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 For sure. Well, thank you for sharing that.
okay, you're welcome.
So, speaking of careers, what would you tell someone who is interested in the medical field to have them prepared for the unexpected or the expectancies of that field? Now, knowing what you've encountered as with 32 years as an RN.
Yeah. That's a tough one. Depends on the day and what kind of day I had, what I would tell somebody. What I would tell somebody now versus just coming off a shift at work are probably completely different because it's so frustrating at work and it's so hard. I said, for one thing, I pity any kid going into the field because it is such a hard, hard job. Often it appears very thankless to us. We get abused a lot, not just by patients, but by staff, by fellow staff, by management. Nurses are often kind of like a tool. Well, that one's broke, get another one. Somebody gets hurt, just get another one, call another one. There's lots of nurses. And what I mean by getting hurt is, especially if you work in psych nursing, we get beat up all the time and we get hurt and we get expected to work with that same patient the next day. I have a friend that was stabbed through the hand with a knife. He stabbed through the hand because he put his hand in front of his face, and he had to go work with that patient the next day. Now, what other job would you get attacked, beat up, broken legs, limbs, eyes put out, whatever, and have to go back and work with the same patients for months or years? And that's what a nurse has to do, sadly. And in the medical side of things, what you see is very, very tough. A little 2-3-year-old kid running around one day, you're laughing at them, they're running around their Superman outfit and, they're sick. The next day you come in and you have to go and perform CPR on that kid. And, the things you see are horrific. They're very, very hard to deal with. So to think that nursing is going to be an easy trek is not the way to think about it. Now, all those things I say would turn people off and we'd never have any nurses, and that's not good. So I just tell people these stories, like, these are the things you're going to have to deal with. It's better, going into it. Are you that type of person? Can you deal with that? Because they say nurses are used to that and they're used to dealing with things. They can see tragedy. They know how, they take special classes. No, we don't take special classes in how to deal with the 3-year-old dying and think there's no class you can take that makes you immune to all the emotions that come with that and all the heartache, So if you're not the type of person that can handle that, one, you're not going to be a very effective nurse. And two, you're going to be miserable. And if you're miserable at work, you're miserable throughout your whole life, basically. So there's a lot to be considered when telling someone to go into nursing or not, and it sounds very negative, but it's real,
Yeah. And I mean, and that's one of the things that has been occurring is that there is short-staffed and overworked and underpaid nurses and doctors and other medical staff. Would you agree or disagree that the mistreatment has increased since the pandemic because of the overwork, the underpaid, the understaffed? And then I guess the next question would be, have you ever been involved in as a traveling RN, paid traveling nurses and RNs and other caregivers? And that was like a big thing because if they were underpaid and overworked, some people would actually quit and come back in and have a higher rate of pay because they're no longer in that range of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Or they went traveling RN because they got more money and they weren't able to deal with the crap all the time.
Yeah, they can move around when they want, quit and move on. They have little short contracts. Some of them are as low as 3 weeks and others are 3 months kind of thing. It always changes to fit the times. But right now, like a traveling nurse, and you have to be, I think most of the rules are you have to be 50 miles away from your last job to be considered traveling nurse. And so that's not hard. So right now in Houston, I think people are getting around $8,000 a week to work as a nurse. And other spots in the north, they're getting $5,000-6,000 a week to work like a COVID ward, or in a prison, you can get $3,000 a week. Those kind of numbers are always different. but you're working alongside somebody that's getting about a third of what you're getting, or a quarter of what you're getting. And that has caused a lot of animosity in the last couple of years, especially because a lot of people are traveling because the wages are just so high. They just can't get nurses. You think about that, $8,000 US a week. And I think most places give 2,000 to 3,000, 2,400, I think the last one I read, cash in an envelope. It's not even tracked. They just give you cash each week. They're so desperate for nurses, and the people working alongside of them, making 1,500 a week. So, it does cause a lot of animosity for sure.
Yeah. And me working in the payroll department, I got to see that come across like one person who has, and I worked from HR, so I would look at their resumes. I've done their interviews. I've spoken to over the phone. I've done their orientations. I've done their payroll documents, and I've, cut their checks. And to see the transition between demographically, as well as educational background, as well as their ethnicity background, there's just a lot of chaos in that area where they're not being treated on the same equal basis of pay because of their ethnicity. I've seen microaggression from coworker to coworker to the medical staff to patients because of that. And I think you've even hit on it, that some of the mistreatments do kind of narrow on people of color community, or was that considered equal in your eyes, or what you've experienced?
Well, lately, the last job I did was a regular staff member for quite a few years, so I haven't done the travel nursing in quite a while, but I know people who have. And where I was when I was doing it, I didn't see nurses around me, treating people badly due to race or color. They might say things in the hallway or whatever, but they didn't treat the patient like, not give them treatment, where I was. The reverse I've seen where patients are actually abusive to staff. I could talk about that story if you want. I don't know if you want to get into that now or not, but I've seen that. Patients are abusive to staff because of their color. And the abuse is wrong no matter which side you're on, right?
Right, exactly.
So, but we had one patient, I was just young, out of school. I was only, I think, 21, maybe 22. And I was standing in the hallway getting my meds ready. And I was getting meds ready for this particular patient who was getting a bowel series the next day, had all kinds of bowel problems. And I heard a commotion. I heard a whole bunch of dirty language, F this, F that. There was a young nurse tech, probably 19 years old, and she was black, and she was running out of the room as I heard him say, "Stay the F out of my room," and he used the N word, and he threw a box of Kleenex at her. And I said, well, what's going on there? What's going on? She goes, "Oh, it's okay. It's okay. He doesn't want me in my room on account of me being colored, or in his room." I said, "What do you mean he doesn't want you in your room?" This is new to me, all this blatant racism. "He doesn't want me in his room because I'm black." I said, "Well, what were you doing in there?" She says, "Well, I was trying to help him potty, because he has all kinds of bowel problems." I said, "Really?" So I went, and she was quite shaken, I said, "I will talk to him." So I went in and I said, "Hello, Reverend." He was a reverend. Okay. And treating his fellow man, this young girl, horribly, but he was a reverend, So I didn't put a lot of stock into that. Anyways, I said, "Listen, why are you throwing stuff at that young girl and calling her dirty names?" He says, "Well, I don't want her in there. I don't want those dirty things in here." And I said, "Dirty things? The girl that's coming in and helping wipe your bum because you can't do it yourself. And you're treating her like that." "Well, I just don't like them. I don't want them in here. You can take care of me, Jack." I said, "Well, that's actually her job." I said, "I'm the head nurse." I said, "I have to be at the front." I was trying to be, I was trying to not just, if I was on the street, it would have got handled quite a bit differently. But anyways, I was trying to be professional. And I said, "Well, honestly," I said, "it's not my job and I don't have time for that. I'm the head nurse. I have a lot of other things I have to do." and people require me to do it. She's not able to do that. She's not educated to do that. Nobody else on the floor here is. I have to do that. So I won't have time to treat you, to do things. I said, you might wait a long time. He said, I don't care. I don't care how long I have to wait. That's fine. So I gave him his medicine, which was a big bottle of mag citrate. Anybody nurse is just laughing already, probably. So the mag citrate is what we give in emergencies, basically when nothing else works to allow your bowels to work. It pushes it through. It's like Drano for your bowels, So I gave that to him. Usually 15, 20 minutes later, you're on the pot. I said, I won't be able to get back here for a long time. He says, just don't send any of those dirty little N-word people in here. I said, okay, I won't. So about 2.5 hours later, his call bell had been going off for about an hour and a half. And this nurse tech who had been abused by him, she tried to run back in. I said, whoa. She said, no, I'll go get him. I said, no, you won't. She goes, why? Why don't you want me to help him? I said, because you're a dirty N, repeating what he said. And she just looked at me shocked. And then she got a little smile on her face because I don't think she's used to people sticking up for her. I said, you go about your business and do your other patients. I said, I'm following his request. When I'm done my work, I will help him. So I went in and I helped him after about 2.5 hours. And he was sobbing in the bed. And there was stool running between his legs down over the end of the bed and dripping on the floor at the foot of the bed. And he can't get up to walk himself, And he's crying, Jack, why did you leave me here? I said, well, I told you I was busy. He said, was there nobody else to come? I said, just those dirty little N girls, And he got the point, So anyway, I did help him. I cleaned him up and all that. He said, well, just send them in next time. I said, I'll send them in. You better be appropriate with them. Oh, I will. And, he was taught a lesson. But anyways, and I honestly did go in to help him when I was free. But I knew I was going to be quite busy. I mean, you work in med surg, it's always busy. So I thought afterwards, oh shit, I'm going to be fired over this one because, I mean, it's a paying hop. You pay to play, right? If you're a patient, you pay, and if they pay well, you kiss their ass. That's the way management does, so they get the money, right? I figured I'll be fired, but I guess he didn't complain. And over the next week, he had left. He come in and he had a note for me, and it said something to the effect of, thanks for the lesson in humanity, Jack. I will pray for you. And he must have done some thinking on it. And he apologized to every Black person on the ward over the next week for the way he treated them.
Wow.
But, this is a young girl, her first job probably, trying to work and being treated like that for no good reason. That was just a minor thing. There's lots of other stories about color and abuse that I could get into. Like we had nine guys come in the ER all shot up one night. And I was working with this one guy. He was shot 4 times directly in the chest. And I mean, usually you're going to die with that. But we saved him. I put 3 big bags of fluid in him right away. And I was working feverishly thinking, geez, I didn't cover this in school. Like, what do I do here? Anyway, I got him to come to, and he was talking to me. And he was probably 300 pounds. He's a very big young man, probably 18, 19, Black. And then the Texas Rangers were there. And, it was a crime scene. Obviously, they have to do their job. And he kept getting in my way, asking him, who shot first? Who did this? What's the name of the guy? Whose car was it? All these questions that police have to ask. I understand that. But he was very close to dying, and I was trying to work on him. I said, look, you got to get out of the way. You got to get out of the way. And he wouldn't listen to me, so I pushed him, the police officer. I pushed him at one point with my forearm and was trying to maintain a sterile field in the dressing I was doing. And he looked at me like he could kill me, and because you don't push a police officer in Texas. You just don't without ramifications, And he must have realized he was overstepping his bounds too, because I had a job to do. So he didn't do anything to me. But then he said, in front of everybody in the ER, like he was talking about the weather, I don't know why you're working so hard to try to save this N-word guy. He's just going to go out and shoot somebody in 6 months anyway. So I'm staring at him at this point. I'm thinking, how can you talk like that in an emergency room in front of so many witnesses to see your despicable behavior? I'm thinking, what goes on in the cruiser when nobody's around? If you're going to talk that way in front of me, who could report him to his boss and this and that, it was just unreal. Which is, so, okay, so this particular guy was a criminal, this patient. He was a criminal. Obviously he'd shot some people and he had a long rap sheet. But if you're getting treated like that by the police in a public area, that's certainly not encouragement to better yourself and do better the next time. No, that you harbor all that resentment and you get mad and want to go out and shoot somebody else. I mean, human nature is if you're being treated horribly, you're going to act worse back. He already had problems anyways and probably had encountered them all along, to get him to this point. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the whole sociology of this one particular patient, but just pathetic things like that could go on. I just couldn't believe it. And nobody else bat an eye. It was just unreal. I had 2 or 3 other stories that I was putting together, and the editor wanted me to take them out actually, because all the Black Lives Matter stuff was going on, and said it could make you look bad. I said, but I didn't. I'm sticking up for them, sticking up for people that are being abused. I said, yeah, but just the nature of this story right now and what all is going on, they didn't really want to put it in because she said it could get misconstrued and make you look bad with stories. I said, well, I don't see how it can make me look bad. But anyway, I conceded and I let them take those 2 stories out. But it was about stuff going on in the hospitals, and might have been some of my colorful language I had in there too that they didn't like. I don't know, but I've got them. I'm putting them in the next book anyway. I don't care. I'm putting them in. So I tend to just say the real word, but they wouldn't put that in the book. They said, well, I think you should put N-word and not the full word and all the connotations and all the nastiness comes with it. And I said, yes, but I'm telling a story, and it was vulgar. It was mean. And I think it should be used. Not to run around saying that word, but I mean, in this case, it should be used because this is what the person was saying. And I think it should be used to show, but they didn't really want to put it. And I thought, well, I'll go along with it. But, I don't know. It was unreal, the amount of stuff you see racially in the hospitals too. Now, I'd like to think that's gotten better over the last few years. I mean, that story was early in my career. And as I say, I'm old now, so I don't know how much is still going on in that type of environment.
Yeah, I beg to differ. Because I live in Texas too. So I live in Greenville, Texas.
Oh, yes.
So yeah. And it is not. It's either at the same amount or worse, and doesn't even matter if they have a body camera on or not. You noticed it a lot going on that are in a pursuit of a criminal and they retaliate against the actual officer who's trying to pull off the other officer who's trying to attack the criminal because they're in the rage of catching up with this person, that they turn their anger towards their partner.
Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah, and it's like...
I've seen that with nurses too.
Yeah, and it's insane. Like, law enforcement itself is a high stress environment. Being in a hospital is a high stress. I can't even fathom what the percentage is in suicidal and drug usage for just to numb the pain in regards to that high risk, high stressed environment. And it's just like unbelievable and on top of that, if you are a person who's getting minimum wage and you probably get more money flipping a burger, like, what do you prefer? That scares a lot of people off into getting involved into medical and law enforcement, because flipping a burger, you just need a bachelor's degree. And you get, what, $15 an hour for flipping a burger versus a police officer who is begging to not die that day and go home to his family for $10 an hour. Like, that's insane.
Oh, it's a horrible job, like policing and nursing, all those type things. It's very hard, and the PTSD levels are high. So it's a horrible job. And unfortunately, sometimes some officers and some nurses react because they're afraid, because they've been beaten or shot at so many times that they go overboard. So they get into all this defund the police business, which I think is horrible. If anything, they need more money to properly sift out those type of people, offer them treatment, educate them more so that when they get in these scenarios, they don't lose their mind or their train of thought and do stupid things. You know, even if they were biased and didn't like a person, because mostly everybody, me included, when there's certain people, I'm talking just people in general, whether it's, their behavior because, they are abusing their wife or whatever. Like, there's bias we have on people, but we have to be professional when we're working with somebody. You know what I mean? And if we're not, if we're a loose cannon, we need to be called out by our coworkers, sent for some courses. Maybe they'll discover, oh, he's got drug abuse, he's an alcoholic, whatever. Treatment needs to happen. And one of the biggest things that needs to happen with the police, and I think mainly the police, but other occupations as well, for this more funding business I'm talking about, I think each police officer should have to go and work in a psych ward like a student nurse does for about a month and really get an idea of what goes on, because there's many patients that'll be yelling, screaming, threatening. A 300-pound guy going to put his fist through the wall and kill a bunch of people, when you could have 8 or 10 big guys like me go in and wrestle and take him down. Or we can have one tiny little 85-pound woman go in and talk him down and walk him to his room and put him on doing some mindfulness or some meditation stuff. I've seen it many times. You just have to know what to say to a person sometimes. Sometimes that goes badly too. It doesn't always work. But in many cases, if you just know what the person's diagnosis is, or you can see what they're going through, whether they're schizophrenic or whatever, all of these brutal killings and beatings could be avoided. Not all, a lot of them, And I think that's what we need to do. And we need to do more of that with nurses as well. I'm pretty well educated in that because I've worked psych nursing for a lot of years, and I'm also a psychotherapist too. And, but there's a lot of nurses, new nurses working in an emergency room or med surg that really don't have a clue how to handle psych patients. More education is what we need.
Yeah. And I think that you're right on the money when it comes to that. I think the thing that's getting construed is when you say defund, there's a misunderstanding on how it is done. And I get it. There needs to be funding, but it needs to be sifted into a different department instead of purchasing more AK-47s or whatever the case may be, when
Exactly.
They should actually be taught how to, what do you call it, negotiator 101 kind of a thing. And I know there's people out there that their job is nothing but to be a negotiator in high risk, high terrorist situations where you're trying to get someone off a tall building, or to let the person let go of hostages in a situation like that. But I think police officers would have a beneficial understanding on having that as a class, at least some type of learning class involved in their training, as well as, I think I love the idea where you said go into a psych ward. I would take it a step further and say sleep 1 week with the homeless, have almost like an exchange student scenario with going from urban to suburban or vice versa, and actually live with a family in the high rate area, not a safe space for that person, but at least to know the goings ons, that it's not everybody is supposed to be looked upon as, because of their skin color or their background, that they're all bad. And I think to have that understanding that not all law officers are bad. I mean, if there was a way to have that put into their training in diversity 101 or cultural diversity 101 as their classes, there'll be less of these violence conflicts. I have a clean record, but I could, one of the jokes that we have is, driving while black, DWB.
And isn't that sad that that's referred to as a joke?
It is. It's a sad cultural joke. I mean, we're a little like grimacing in the process of joking, because we're trying to say that it's almost considered a norm, or we're accepting that no matter what we do, we still have to have our P's and Q's. And unfortunately, that doesn't even work out either. We have children who are being gunned down because they're walking down the street grabbing something from the store.
Yeah.
And they still get done on like they're a piece of trash. And so it's like nobody's safe no matter what. So why do we have to shift our demeanor based on the person's ethnicity. So yeah, thank you for sharing all those stories with me. There's actually a clinical study that women of color are given less medication for pain because they believe that they have a higher threshold of dealing with pain, or
Or
they're
drug,
overreacting on the pain.
they're drug seeking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was I've seen similar things, and it was say women who were pregnant going in, or but at a young black male complaining of pain. There's lots of studies, not just one. There's been lots of them that they'll give them regular Tylenol, whereas they'd give the white guy a narcotic, you know, um, Demerol or morphine or whatever, Dilaudid. There's all kinds of them because they see the guy's in pain. Well, they see the other guy's in pain too, but is he faking it a bit and is he drug seeking? This is what they figure contributes to that, you know, and that guy's not getting any help because Tylenol, he could go to the pharmacy and get that. Why is he going into the doctor and not, you know, it's a slap in the face, you know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen studies like that, and it is unfortunate. It is
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
sure. But I've seen a lot of drug abuse over the years, though, like with every color of patient, you know,
Oh,
like
for sure.
so you can understand why people worry about giving too many narcotics. Like I've had so many issues with narcotics over the years, not myself, but I mean patients and staff, and you know, we've had a number of staff stealing narcotics. You know, one of the stories I write about in Nurse Jack is about the staff that get into issues. One of the girls went in and, you know, if your patient's in a coma or out of it and can't respond, don't know what's going on, you know, this one girl would go in and inject herself in her hip with the Demerol for the patient and then give the patient a thing of normal saline. So they'd never know the difference, right? And she come out one day and one of the nurse techs said, Marjorie, you're bleeding, you're bleeding. And you could see it coming through her scrubs. She started to bleed a bit. And she broke down. I think she had enough. She was ready, but she had been using patient's drugs for years. But the stress of the job is so horrible, you know. So you can't maybe blame everything on that, but certainly is a big factor, you know. And we've had other nurse. One, she came in, and people may not be aware of this, but nurses write doctor's orders all the time. Like I might write Demerol, you know, so many milligrams every 3 hours for pain, as per Dr. Willis or whatever, you know, and then write a slash Jack Houston, you know. So basically, the nurse has to have a lot of knowledge to be there, be the eyes for the doctor to know what's going on. Because if we get the wrong drugs, the patient can die. Like we're supposed to be pretty smart. We do a lot of stuff that people don't realize. Anyways, this one nurse wrote these orders from this doctor, this elderly man with a hip replacement, and he was there doing therapy and stuff. For 3 nights in a row when she was on, he got Demerol every 3 hours. And then the 2 nights she wasn't there next, no Demerol. And then she came in for another 2 nights and Demerol every 3 hours. And he didn't get any Demerol, only once in that whole time in the daytime while he was actively doing therapy. So, I mean, that looks pretty suspect. What the way she got caught was the head nurse was reading over the orders and what had been going on. And this nurse wrote the order as though this doctor had been talking to her and given the order, but she didn't realize that doctor was off tending to his mother in another country because she was sick and he was out to another doctor. So she couldn't have got the order from him. But, you know, in the 4 years I was at the first hospital I was at in Texas, in the Houston area there was 5 occasions when the police came to the floor while I was working and grabbed a nurse, threw him down, kicking and squealing, cuffed him and took him away for stealing drugs. Like that is a tremendous amount for me, one of the nurses, to witness. And of course, it'd been going on when I wasn't at the hospital too. People all the time doing it. You know, we had another doctor, and I think it's the title Dr. Desperado. He was a wonderful man. You know, he was a really good man. And a lot of Mexican people would come up and they wouldn't have any money, you know, come up over the border and he would treat them, whether they had money or not. And he treated them all the time. And usually a doctor doesn't do anything without getting paid. Every stroke of the pen, they're getting paid for this, paid for that. Paid. He would help them all the time and never worry about the money. Great guy. But one day left, and then a few minutes later, he come crashing back in, literally crashing in through the doors of the emergency room smashed through them with his big Harley, and it was laid out on the floor, spinning out against the nurse's station. And he ran in. He was trying to flush a bag of drugs down the toilet as the police threw his face into the ground. And so here's this guy in his 40s, white male doctor in his 40s, really should have the world by the ass, and he get into trouble with drugs. Whether it was his addiction, I don't think he was selling them. I think he was just probably got addicted to stress or whatever. But he went to rehab. He's back working now, and and I'm glad he is, because he's a very good man. And so that just shows that anybody, how good a person you are, or what your social status is, you can get messed up with drugs. So we should have a little compassion for these people that are into the drugs. Not, oh, he's a druggie. No, that's a bad attitude, talking like that. So,
my gosh, you don't understand it until it actually hits home.
No,
that these are just human beings they're going through a rough patch, or they got involved with the wrong crowd. Everybody does that, some more than others, and they should be treated as such. Like, they're human beings. We all go through some type of tumultuous experience. We want to explore, we want to experiment. And just remember that there was this nurse who was just charged with, I guess, what was it, second degree or first degree, a nurse, for providing the incorrect medication to a patient that actually killed the patient. Have you heard about that case? Oh my gosh.
Was it on purpose they felt she gave too much, or?
No, it was a wrong medication altogether. It was wrong. And it killed the patient. And I don't know the whole story behind it, but the title of, or little bits and pieces of the article were even saying, like, who is going to be even wanting to go and be in the medical field if they do a human error mistake that they did not intend on unaliving a patient, and it did turn it to a tragic situation. Nobody wants to get involved in this type of field, because everybody's going to be accountable for their own.
Right.
I mean, they are accountable for their actions. That's the reason why you triple check. I'm an accountant. I check my accounts, my financial statements, maybe 5 times, because that's just a neurotic thing that you get from being in a type of field of working with somebody's money. Same thing, it goes from taking care of somebody's life, and every minute counts, whether it could be life or death for the patient on your watch. That's you. That's your name on it. So it's insane. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, med errors? Well, first off, every nurse makes medication errors. And every nurse who's a good nurse, conscientious nurse, who cares about their patients, makes med errors. Any nurse that says they don't make med errors is lying. Well, lying to you and lying to themselves. Now, that doesn't mean, geez, we make med errors every day and you're probably going to die if you come into this hospital. You know what I mean? But errors happen, And we had this one nurse, this one girl made a comment about a nurse that made a med error, and it wasn't very nice. And somebody corrected her and said, look, it could happen to anyone. And she says, I don't make med errors. I've been a nurse for 30 years and I don't make med errors. If you pay attention, whatever. Anyway, she was on a new floor of work that night, and we had meds at the time. Chlorohydrate helps you sleep at night. It was in a liquid form. A lot of the stuff in a psych hospital is liquid form. And we also have chlorpromazine. It's an antipsychotic. It's easy to mix them up when you're first starting, but she mixed it up and she gave about 17 or 18 patients the chlorpromazine instead of the chlorohydrate. So the dose is very, very high. The whole floor next day, they were just laying there in a puddle of their own sweat or urine. They couldn't even hardly get up. They were just almost comatose. They slept all day long. None of them were harmed. They just were knocked out big time. And there's a nurse that never makes any med errors, So took her a while to live that one down. But it happens, it can happen. I've made med errors and you feel horrible afterwards, but nothing is like it is in the lab at school when you're being taught. You've got bells going off. You've got, I've been the charge nurse in charge of a 55-bed unit, medical surgical unit, and I had to take 22 patients myself. So who the hell's getting good care that night? There's some patients you don't see for 12 hours. Nobody looks in on them. Nobody. Because the less nurses you have, the less they have to pay for salaries, you know. And it's pathetic because really 6 or 8 patients, if you had that on a shift, that would be great. People be getting good care. Even one patient can tie you up for the entire shift. And I write about that. Like one patient can tie you up. So the other 21 you have, nobody's looking in on them. Oh, and you're the boss of all these other nurses that are coming to you with problems. And you're like, well, I can't help you, And that's what it is, not just in Texas, but I think that's happening more and more all around the world. Staffing is getting less and less. It's all about money. And most of the med errors and all those kind of things that do happen, if we weren't concerned with money, most of them wouldn't be happening because we wouldn't be under such duress, such stress, overworked, all those kind of things. Most of the med errors happen because we're in a hurry and we're flustered because of that. And if you're human, you're going to make mistakes.
Oh, yeah. We've hinted on this book of yours throughout our conversation. And I wanted to let the listeners know what the name of the book is and where are they able to get it.
Okay. Well, the name of the book is Nurse Jack. Just very simple, Nurse Jack. And to remember where you can get it, if you look at my website, I list all the places it's for sale. NurseJack911, pretty easy to remember, .com. NurseJack911.com. And you scroll down and it shows 10 different platforms, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, like all the different ones. It's on all the big ones. Like I have people buying it in Australia and UK and, through Amazon, usually over there. And it's also, there's every bookstore you go into, you can order it through them if you want. Some of them have it on the shelves, some don't, It's in the ebook as well, Working on getting an audio book made. That would be neat. Just one more thing to do, But yeah, so it can be bought pretty well anywhere. And it's this, I think there's 36 stories in that, and they're all true stories. Most of them are criminal. Like, the one about, I don't name the patients. I want to let people know they all have a name in the book, but I've changed their name to protect them, especially the woman that was being raped and, and the hospital covered it up and all that kind of stuff. Like, for her family and her kids, I had to keep the name different, Yeah. But that was a horrible story. And I actually put a stop to it, and the manager slapped me and pretty near put me down. I was seeing stars, But they were a good paying customer, so it's okay to rape somebody if they're paying a lot for the suite,
Oh, no.
And that was, that's obviously sarcasm, yes.
Yeah, I know.
But I couldn't believe all the women on the floor were turning a blind eye to it because, well, there were RPNs making $8 an hour, had kids, single mothers. They didn't want to lose their job, and they were fearful and they were desperate for a job. And I guess I'm just guessing that's why they let it go. And the hospital they took my notes and got rid of them. They got rid of my notes and hid them. And, so I said, I finally said, okay, that's it. I'm going to the Texas Rangers, Marvin's Inlet, whatever. I'm going to get it out here, this story. And, then things changed in a hurry. But anyway, I won't say any more and ruin the story for people, but it's just the things you see are unreal. And some people worry that it could be damaging. Like, could that make people, we touched on this earlier, could that make people afraid to go to the hospital? Well, I didn't do it for that, but what I want to tell people is I wrote this book so you know all the horrible things that can happen and do happen. But if I were a police officer, I'm sure I could write a bunch of horrible things. If I was a teacher, I could write a bunch of horrible things that happen in the classroom, So, but I wanted to inform people this is the way it is. So if you have a sick family member, learn everything you can about their illness. And when, something doesn't seem right, like that patient shouldn't get that med and the nurse is pushing it through their vein, speak up. Say, hey, how come that's happening? Or how come the doctor didn't do this? Or people have this fear of the doctor or the nurse because we are elevated to such a level to some people. We're like, we're the important people. We're put on this status level by some. I'm not saying we should be, but you should have respect for people. But we're not gods. So if you tell us something and we hear what you're saying, we might thank you profusely because we were just about to give the patient a med that would kill them. You know what I mean? So speak up. And when things aren't right, like, don't just leave your kid at the hospital. A lot of people leave their young kids overnight at the hospital. I'd be staying with that kid if I could at all. You want to make sure things are done right. Know about their condition. And then you won't have someone like me having to code your little 3-year-old because they had a heart attack because the nurse was given the wrong medicine. I've had to do that. And so it's just be aware, ask questions, and don't worry about snarky remarks that you may get from some practitioners. It's your family member or it's you, and you deserve to be answered. And that's what I want people to realize, you know. But yeah, the book's doing well. I'm getting about 4.5 stars globally, and it's going over well. I'd feared I'd get 1 or 2. I didn't know how it was going to go, but I didn't write it to get rich and sell a bunch of books. I wrote it was more of a therapeutic thing, you know, for me, because some of the stories were even hard to write. I had to go back to them several times because even 20, 30 years later, they make you tear up and get all upset because they're horrible. And a word of caution, nobody can read this book. So I've been told without crying a couple of times, but they have to keep reading it, they say. So it's, but I did put some funny stories in too. So it's not all gloom and doom. So
just break up the monotony or the stories. Absolutely.
Right.
Wow. Well, it's an honor to actually speak with you, Jack. Thank you so much for this. You
Thank
pretty
you.
much answered all my questions because I was going to ask you about.
If you're into true crime podcasts, here is a clip from Hands Off My Podcast.
When I was a prime investigator 5 years ago, we picked up a case that was Shanice Harris' case. And after certain months working on the case, it turned out to be that I knew the family personally. I knew the mother. And me and her went to school together. And after a while of working on the case with no leads, no nothing, you know, I myself took it personal. So I spoke to my other half and I was like, you know, we're missing something. You know, there's something missing out here. And then it became Hope Alive 845 because we started noticing there's a lot of missing people that's not even being talked about.
This podcast can be heard on any of the podcast platforms every Thursday.